Awesome.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Hub. I'm your host, Matt Hubbard. Today's guest is Uriel Berrum. Uriel is a friend of mine. We used to work together at Goldman Sachs. And I'll let him go ahead and introduce himself and what he's doing now.
Hey, everybody. Matt, well, thank you for having me on today. Really enjoyed getting to know you a few years back when we were working together, and really glad that, we're still connected. And as Matt mentioned, used to work at Goldman together. Now I have transitioned into co-founding a digital agency where we work on political campaigns as well as public issue advocacy organizations. And we essentially help them tell their mission, win their elections through digital media.
Cool. Great. You've been killing it on the road bike lately. I've enjoyed watching you on Strava, and you've just pulled off a 100-miler, which is pretty impressive there in Colorado.
Oh man, I appreciate that. No, I actually, I started biking during quarantine. So my goal at the end of the summer was to do a 100-mile century ride. But then when I set off to do it last weekend of the summer, and I did not realize what I got myself into, because I chose a path that also had a 7,000-foot elevation gain. So I was just like, I was just kind of like, it was like 35 miles in, no service on my phone. So if there was any thought of giving up, I quickly had to get rid of that and just kind of finish it. So I'm glad we got it done.
Well, it's funny. I had the same, a lot of people started biking, during the quarantine and rediscovered it. But, I've been biking for a couple of years, but I've never really done serious mileage. I say I'm a mountain biker first and a road biker second. But I did a 40-mile loop up through the mountains here, and that was pretty brutal. So I can only imagine 100 miles. So.
And to be honest, I wish I got into biking when I was in Utah, because I feel like just the terrain and the infrastructure that you have there is probably just incredible.
Yeah. Well, Colorado is good, but you definitely have to go a little bit ways out of the city to hit it. So.
Right.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing now? So you're working for this digital public advocacy. So you're working for Joe Biden's campaign, and you're focused mainly on Michigan. Is that correct? Or help us understand a little bit more what you're doing.
Sure. Yeah. So Effect.org, like I mentioned, is a digital agency. We are a standalone independent company. We usually come on to campaigns as digital consultants from start to finish. So that's everything from building a logo and website all the way through to segmenting voter data and targeting folks on digital media, either on Facebook or other various social channels like YouTube or Google. So right now we're actually not working with the Biden campaign, but we're doing everything that we can to make sure that Biden gets elected in November. So we have focused on deploying a voter access campaign in the state of Michigan to try to get 20,000 ballots into the hands of underserved Democrats. And that's only because in 2016, you may not know that Trump won the election by just 10,000 votes, which was a margin of 0.03%. So we're actually trying to.
There in Michigan, he won by 10,000 votes.
Yeah, exactly. So in the state of Michigan, right, he was able to win all of the state's 16 electoral college points with just 10,000 votes. A slim margin, 0.03%. Yeah. So we're trying to do everything that we can to ensure that doesn't happen again. So we've made it our goal to double the amount of ballots that we can get to Democratic communities that actually failed to cast a vote in 2016, to ensure that they have an alternative way to vote and turn out, in favor for Joe Biden and the Democrats. So, like I mentioned, the election is less than 30 days away. The application is less than 25 days away for Michigan voters to apply for that. So we're, full speed going towards that goal.
Nice. Well, that's great. Allowing people a chance to exercise their right to vote. So, thanks for the work you're doing. I'm just kind of curious, how do you, how do you have this information of what, people's political preference are? How do you know who these, 20,000 Democratic voters that didn't vote last time, how do you know that, oh, this person is someone we need to go reach out to? Is that just public information? Is this Cambridge Analytica, the whole Facebook and Donald Trump thing again? You know, I know voting is getting pretty sophisticated, and like both parties have a pretty sophisticated like data, you know, data organization behind like, hey, these are the voters we need to target. You know, here's who we need to reach out to. Here's the ads we need to show, and social media is a big part of that, allowing you to track that. Is that kind of how you're doing it? Just like looking on social media, or are you going through like public court records? Like, help us identify. Like, how do you identify who those voters are?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, and that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So, frankly, it's a combination of both, using the existing algorithms and tools within Facebook and other channels that we use. And to your point, voter information is publicly available across the country. It is domiciled, obviously, and recorded at the local and state level. So, for instance, in the state of Michigan, voters do not have to indicate what political party that they are when they register to vote.
Oh,
So
interesting.
we are just aggregating data based off of likely Democrat, folks that are engaging with liberal and Democratic content. But we can see voter history. So when I'm actually able to pull publicly available voter list, I have the ability to see if any voter has voted in any of the last 20 elections. So, we're targeting folks that failed to cast a ballot in 2016. That information is public. What is not in public is how they voted. So I can actually see if any voter across the country voted any which way, Hillary or Trump in 2016, but I can't see whether or not they did cast a vote. And that's, like I said, that's universal across the country. In some states, it's a lot easier to get data than others.
Right.
But if you have the right resources and you're willing to be persistent, you can find that data to be able to incentivize folks, reach them, and talk to them about alternative ways.
Totally, totally. Well, that's interesting because like if like because Hillary 2016 election, right? There was kind of this blue wall was like, hey, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin had never voted Republican since like what 88, since Ronald
Yeah,
Reagan, like
yeah,
84
exactly.
since the sweep, and so it's kind of like I don't know, like this is going to vote for Hillary Clinton, like this is going to go blue, like we don't really need to worry about it, and so she didn't campaign there the last couple of weeks, and Donald Trump, I don't know if it was his digital advertising or his social media or whoever was like, hey, you should campaign there, and then surprised everyone. So I'm curious, like, and this is just me thinking out loud, like if there were like people who voted 2016, 2012, or like 2012, 2008, they voted traditionally Democrat, and then Donald Trump kind of comes in and again, this is part 4 of the 4-part series of interview people across the political spectrum that like Donald Trump kind of totally changed the Republican Party, and so I wonder if people who voted Democrat 2012, 2008, Donald Trump comes in and they're like, no, this is my guy. Maybe it's the blue collar, like non-college educated, like white male, maybe that. So it'd be interesting to see, like, the work you're doing, maybe you're sending ballots to people that like wouldn't vote for Joe Biden because they're voting for Donald Trump. But I guess that's why you would engage them on social media, see if they like more of the liberal content versus like more of the conservative content. I guess that would be another check to make sure you're like sending ballots to who you want to send the ballots, right?
Right. Yeah. So we're actually deploying a text messaging campaign. So
Oh,
we
okay.
have the ability to in real time talk to these voters. So we've been, as a company, we've been able to send over 5 million text messages over the past 2 years.
Wow.
So with that experience, we've kind of figured out a way to really engage voters in such a way that it enables us to, one, collect data, and two, use that data to be able to effectively communicate with them. So in this case, we're reaching out to folks. We're first of all just introducing ourselves and what we're about. Then we're asking them if they're interested in a vote by mail ballot. With that question, it enables them to re-engage with us and
Yeah.
let us know their disposition. So, to be honest, we've been texting folks and we're getting some good responses of folks being like, yeah, I'm looking forward to voting blue, and then we do have some folks that are saying, Trump 2020.
Right.
So with that, we're trying to engage with them. It's a little bit less of a persuasion campaign, but we do want to make sure that we're reaching Democrats and underserved Democrats especially. But it's not our job to not give people these resources, because it is open to everyone, right? Michigan is a no excuse vote by mail state, which means that every registered voter on the books has the ability to apply for a vote by mail ballot. But it's not easy, and that's the problem we're trying to solve. Colorado and Utah are universal vote by mail, so every voter gets a ballot mailed directly to their door 3 weeks or so before the election. That's not the case in Michigan. In Michigan, you do have to go in person or vote early. The option is there to vote by mail, but at this point, only 30% of the entire electorate has applied for that. So, we're essentially just trying to offer the Colorado and Utah model to those folks in Michigan for this election.
Gotcha. And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but so you're not working with the Joe Biden campaign, right? This is more of a public service for, for the people of Michigan.
For the campaign, yeah.
Is the people of Michigan, is the state government paying for this, or is this just kind of more like you guys doing more like volunteer work, or like are the people who getting the ballots, do they pay for this, or is this more of just like a public advocacy program?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I'm glad you asked it. So we are bootstrapping this. We actually launched a crowdfunding campaign to make sure that we get funds in the door to be able to deploy this campaign. So we're fundraising. We're trying to reach close to $120,000 to make sure that we can enroll 20,000 voters. We have historically been able to convert an application about $6 per voter. So what we're doing, like I said, is we're reaching out to folks like you. We're reaching out to folks all across the country who are, feeling the same way that we're feeling about knowing that we need to stop Donald Trump from winning a second term. All proceeds that come in are going directly to reaching Michigan voters, segmenting lists, making sure that we're texting them. My company is pretty much offering our pro bono services in terms of labor and setup and management of this campaign, and we're just using that money to deploy the text messaging. We just solidified a partnership with a pretty sweet company called Scale to Win, which is a peer-to-peer text messaging company that focuses on political campaigns. They were born out of the Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. Nice. So they're pretty fired up. They're excited that we're going to be using their software to reach folks. But yeah, no, we are just doing this, through effect.org, out of the willingness to really step into the moment and making sure that we help Joe Biden, and we do everything we can to make sure that he and Kamala Harris win this election.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. It's a cool thing about America, right? If you want to get behind a candidate, you can do it. It doesn't matter if they're Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, or Michael Bloomberg. So I kind of want to go back a little bit, because during the nomination process, you talked. Two other questions first. Have you come across a lot of shy Trumpers and people that you've texted? Because, that's one thing that kind of surprised Hillary in the 2016 election. All the polls were like, wow, Hillary's dominating, up 8 points, 10 points, and then all of a sudden election happens, and it was like this kind of big surprise, and people were like, whoa, these polls are way wrong. Have you kind of found that with going on now, or is people like, no, I'm Trump 2020, I'm not afraid to admit it? Or is there people who are just don't respond, and who maybe could be Trump voters? And how big do you think that shy Trumper group is?
Yeah. That's a hard question to gauge, Matt. I mean, we are getting a lot of the folks who are right up front, Trump 2020.
Right.
They are vocal about it. In all honesty, every text messaging campaign that we deploy, we get, at best a reply rate of 20%. So, 80% of the folks that we're reaching don't seem to reply on the first go around. That's why, we do retargeting, making sure we're hitting those folks again. But I think where we are now, we've been polarized so much by this president that it's kind of hard to be in the silent majority that
Yeah.
that we were all claiming that won Trump the election in 2016. Those folks that you mentioned that were somewhat on the fence leaning Trump, but didn't want to actually come out of it because of the
Social
embodiment of who
stigma.
he was, a
Yeah.
social stigma. I think we're to the point right now where you can't actually be that. You're kind of forced into these
Yeah.
two directions. It's really hard to stay in the middle. And I'm talking to some of my friends to make sure that they actually pick a side and they pick Joe Biden, and not stay out, because I know in 2016 another option was I'm just going to vote for Gary Johnson, third party,
Yeah.
because I can't decide. I think this is one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Coming up against an incumbent president who proved in the first debate that he's never actually been a Republican.
Yeah.
He doesn't embody the values that Mike
Traditional
Pence tried.
Republican. Yeah.
Mike Pence did a good job in his closing statement this week at really pleading with the American people about what it means to be a conservative and a Republican. His example of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Justice Scalia being good friends
Yeah.
despite being polar opposites. And I was just sitting there thinking that, how could you say that with a straight face, knowing that you're serving under a president that completely disregards every single one of those values? So I think that's just kind of where we are as a country, is being polarized and pushed in every direction. I'm hopeful that we can elect Joe Biden so we can start to have these conversations. We can go back to ideology. We could talk about policy nuances, because as it stands now, it's pretty difficult to get to that point.
Yeah, I agree. His personality is such that it just sucks everything else in the room. Yeah, it makes it tough. And like I said, I don't really want to talk about Donald Trump, but I was curious to see like what size that never shy Trumpers was out there, just in your interactions. And I think you're right. I think that group is either converted to, hey, I'm solidly going to vote for Trump, or like, hey, I'm going to vote for Biden. This has been crazy the last 4 years. Trump's like, his character, the way he acts, the way he treats other people. Like, I'm definitely Biden.
Right.
I think that group's a lot smaller than it was in 2016. And I'd be very surprised if there's any big, this hidden group of voters that sways the election. So the other thing I want to touch base on was the Bernie, the Bernie campaign, the text messaging platform that you're using. How easy have you seen, because Bernie was the other, nominee, I guess, Democratic, he was trying to get the nomination. He lasted till the very end, until Joe basically kind of swept everything away. Has it been easy for a lot of those supporters, Bernie supporters, to like come and follow Joe? Has it been more about like, hey, maybe Joe's not everything like we wanted, but that's okay, like we got to get Donald Trump out? Or has it been kind of like, we're waiting until 2024 until we can nominate someone who's like believes more like Joe Biden, or believes more like Bernie Sanders believes? Like, what's kind of the reaction or the interaction you've had with Bernie supporters?
Yeah. I mean, I have become pretty optimistic about the ability for the Democratic Party to unite post the nomination. I've found that some of my friends in my circle who were Bernie supporters, whether they are reluctant, they have still stepped up and supported Donald Trump in some capacity, because they know that the alternative is not something that we can afford.
Right.
And I'm also pretty hopeful because we have seen the opposite on the Republican side, right? You have folks like, Sidney McCain, John Kasich, Jeff Flake, right? Just completely break from that, because, folks like that are extremely principled, in terms of what it means to be a conservative and a Republican and embody those American ideals. And they just can't bring themselves to support someone like Trump. And I see the opposite on the Democratic side. And I see that people are stepping up, especially given how polarized our primary was. Like Bernie had such a great following of folks that he fired up, rightfully so. And despite the fact that he was not able to become the nominee, I see a lot of those people stepping up and making sure that they do everything that they can to make sure that Joe Biden and the Democrats win this time around.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I was just curious. The other thing I wanted to ask you, so initially you supported Michael Bloomberg way earlier on in the nomination process. Why do you think his campaign, and a little backstory, I told this on an earlier episode, my wife and I, when the Democratic nomination process was going through the states, in Utah, you could vote, for either party in the nomination process. So we signed up to vote Democrat, and we both, I don't know how she voted, but I think she voted for either Biden or Bloomberg, but I voted for Bloomberg because I was like, yeah, I really feel like he's had great experience, being the mayor of New York. Like, this isn't like he's a businessman, but he's a businessman who knows how to work in public office, kind of opposite of Donald Trump. Like, so I was pretty excited about that. And I didn't want Bernie to win Utah. He ended up winning Utah, but, I remember that time you were a big Bloomberg supporter. And, I feel like, from my perspective, that he just failed to catch on because there's so many other, candidates there in the nomination process. And it was kind of like, pick your slice of like Democratic, like, ideology and like which candidate best embodies that. And so I don't know, what do you think? It was because he was too late? Do you think they kind of resented all the money he had and how much money he spent on it? Like, why do you think he ultimately failed to catch on?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's a great question. And like I mentioned earlier, I think we saw such a polarization in our primary. Luckily, we're to a point where we're united now, but I think a couple of reasons, right? So, my firm was digital director for Bloomberg in Colorado.
Yeah.
And one thing that we really liked about Bloomberg, or a couple of things actually, was his willingness to take on Trump and make that a central point of his campaign, was that we need to stop this president. And I think secondly, maybe more importantly, was his willingness to take on hard problems as well. We've seen through his work here in New York, Bloomberg Philanthropies, he's able to help in the areas of climate change, which is a very important issue to me, education and gun safety. So, as much as politics is a popularity contest at this point, and who you can rattle up the most wins, more or less. I'm still a voter that likes to see the policies and likes to see how we're actually tackling hard issues. So when I read that despite the United States pulling from the Paris Climate Agreement, Bloomberg is doing everything he can as a private citizen to make sure that we are working with local state governments to ensure that we are supplementing that decision to pull out with more sustainable ways, shutting down coal power plants, making sure that any new aren't being built, things like that, really embody the issues that I care about. And I did see Bloomberg as someone that would be able to be in a place that they could actually have a tangible impact on solving these issues. To answer your second question about why I think he failed to catch on, it was very unprecedented the way that he jumped into the race. He essentially decided. It was not only late, the tactical component to it as well. He decided to skip the first 4 contests, right? Iowa, Arizona, New Hampshire, Las Vegas, and South Carolina, I believe it was. That really never happens, right? So if he would have been successful, that would have made an extremely conflicting, in my opinion, precedent on your path to the nomination. Because really, the path to the nomination, it comes down to momentum, right? Like, despite Iowa only being, I think, 4% of all of the delegates that you need, it's about momentum. It's about winning, that state, that caucus. It's about winning South Carolina to make sure that you can show the American people that you are a viable candidate.
I agree.
So it's one of those things, right? Like, I'm hopeful because, despite that, we had someone who had a lot of money come in and spend a lot of money. to try to make a name for themselves and win the nomination, we decided to go a different direction. And, I was actually pretty conflicted working on the campaign when I was starting to realize that this might be a precedent that is set, which is, the rich govern. All you
Yep.
need
Yeah.
is loads of money, and you'll be able to elevate your way up. And I'm not sure that that's a society that I want to live in. So, despite the fact that I like what Bloomberg stands for and what he's about, the tactics and the approach is something that I'm not sure I can get behind. So, I'm glad that we are where we are now. I'm
Yeah.
glad that at the end of the day, we're all united and we have a common goal. And I hope that, post November 3rd, we continue on that common goal and we make sure that we are driving our society in the way that we want to,
Cool.
in the way that we
Great.
should.
Yeah. I think it's, yeah, I think that kind of put to rest one, maybe it was just more of a strategy thing. Cause like money, I think matters a lot in politics campaigns, right? You got to pay for, pay for advertising, pay for people, pay for the boots on the ground. But also I think it showed the limits of like, hey, you just can't come in and just kind of like buy the election,
Right.
It doesn't matter how much money you have, like, and so I think it showed the limits of like, of that, kind of thing.
Right. Exactly.
So, well, I'm excited for the, election. I'm excited, it's been pretty awesome to see Joe Biden, like, he was down in Iowa. He was, I think, placed third. New Hampshire, he placed like third or fourth. And then he just came back. Like, it really was a great, like, comeback story. Wins in South Carolina and then just goes on to, like, basically win the nomination. I mean, Bernie was still won a couple of, but like, he just kind of, it was a great comeback in terms of his campaign. And
100%.
yeah, it was unprecedented, really. So in closing, thanks for taking some time and talking us through, like, I realized we didn't get into as much ideology and politics, but I think it was really informative. And I think a lot of people will like to kind of see like the, behind the scenes, like how you get people, signed up to vote, and just kind of like the work of like, political consultant, digital media company. So, thanks again. I guess, in closing, like, what would you say, like, for Joe Biden, like, what are you most excited about for his campaign, for, maybe his policies? Like, you mentioned a little bit about climate change, gun safety, like, well, what are you most excited about for Joe Biden and like his campaign, and like, where do you think the issues he'll advance if he was elected next 4 years? Like, what would you like to see him advance?
Yeah. I am optimistic that when we elect Joe Biden, we'll be able to repair the damage that has been done at the subconscious level of our country, not only domestically but internationally. I'm really hopeful that his slogan, restore the soul of our nation, he's able to take that into the White House and ensure that we are communicating with folks the values that we embody as a collective society. I'm hopeful that we now have an administration that puts aside all of the semantics and all of the the unnecessary things that we are currently experiencing that prevent us from actually getting to tackling the hard issues. So I really want him and Kamala to be more on the forefront of ensuring that we are at the cutting edge of legislation around healthcare, climate change, education, gun safety. Because as of now, where it currently stands, every other day there's a different tweet that spins the media, into a spiral that prevents us from ever getting anything done. Like an economic recovery is probably at the top of mind, right? Like, how can we figure out a way to make sure that the folks who have been impacted by COVID economically are being relieved, and furthermore, the response of how we're able to address this virus that is impacting not only people economically, but most importantly, there's 200 people dead. So I'm just hopeful that we're going to have a competent person in the White House that is able to address these hard issues. And we could all breathe for 4 years. We could maybe
Yep.
not talk about politics so much, and we could talk more about biking and some of these other things, and we could kind of move on with our lives.
Yeah, it would definitely be nice to turn down the temperature in the room a little bit and in the nation. It'd be nice to watch the news without any mention of Trump or what he said or what he tweeted. It'd just be nice to talk about
Right.
these hard issues. So Uriel, thanks for joining the Hub. Thanks for talking to us, taking some time. It's great having you on. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt.
Yep, we'll see you. All right, welcome back to the Hub, part 2. So we just finished the interview with urielberrum, and now we're going to have an interview or a discussion with a libertarian. This will round out our 4-part series of interviewing people across the political spectrum. I tried to find a Bernie supporter, but they must have all disappeared, or supporting Joe Biden, because no one I couldn't find one to come on the Hub. So I opted for a libertarian perspective instead. So today's second guest is Josh Faber. Josh's older brother, Ryan, was a college roommate of mine and a good friend. And I've come to know Josh just through getting to know the whole Faber family. Awesome family. General conference weekend, we'd always go up to their house to have a bonfire and do s'mores and some other stuff. So, and Josh is currently actually in the MBA program at BYU. So that's another interaction and I've had with him. So Josh, welcome to the Hub.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. That was pretty good, pretty thorough. You did miss the bonfire a couple weeks ago. We had one again.
Well, now that I'm married, things, the dynamics changed a little bit.
You're not as much about hanging with single people.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a different ball game. But maybe one of these times we'll still be able to come up. So, let's dive right on into it. Would it be safe to say you're a libertarian? Is that the kind of, or I don't want to put labels on things if it's not correct. So,
if it's a small L libertarian, that could work.
Okay.
I'm definitely independent, not affiliated with a party, but small L libertarian can work.
Okay, perfect. Well, the small L libertarian, what's your view of Donald Trump, Joe Biden? There's a third party candidate. Joe Jorgensen, I think is their name.
Yeah.
So maybe from your perspective, what are you seeing with political, the election race?
Well, don't forget the Green Party. They're still there.
They're still there. Yes, they are.
I actually can't remember their candidate's name. So my view of the election, so every once in a while, I'll turn on the TV late at night and I'll see a WWE fight, and I'll stay on the channel just to see, just to see the madness. That's honestly a little bit how it feels watching the election. Both sides, it's a freak show for both sides, and it can actually be kind of entertaining.
Yeah. That's the WWE match style wrestling is how some people describe the first debate, was kind of like, man, this is worse than a wrestling show,
Yeah.
But so third party, I guess my problem with third parties and libertarian, small L libertarian, things like that, and you can make the same argument for Green Party, any third party really. It's are you just throwing away your vote? Don't you really have to vote for either Democratic or Republican to make an impact in the election, or it's just a throwaway vote?
Yeah, so I've talked to a number of people about this, and it's it's kind of interesting that what I've observed is there's this winning team complex where people almost don't care how bad their team is as long as
Yeah.
as long as they have a 50-50 of winning. It's like I'll sell my soul to the devil because that's the only way I might win. And it's like, you're winning, but at what cost? And like, what are you winning for? What are you winning? You're winning like a whole set of things that maybe you don't believe in, or you're winning for a crazy person, which is honestly goes for both parties this this election. So it's like there's this winning complex where it doesn't matter how bad your party is, maybe it can win. And I think that's fundamentally how we wound up in this awful situation. We were tricked into thinking that only one of these two parties can win, and it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And honestly, I would never be able to vote for either of the major two parties, at least as it stands, with a clear conscience, because they're both so bad in my opinion. So like keeping a clear conscience, like, because a vote is validating the system, it's validating these bad candidates, and as long as we keep voting for these types of people, we're going to keep getting it because we keep validating the system with our vote. So like if we're going to look at possibly changing that, like really it just has to catch on that you've got to vote your conscience and like know that there are more than two choices. That's something that most people don't know. Like if we're looking at the scale of the whole country, most people, like you and I know about third party Joe Jorgensen, but like you talk to 90% of people who's running for president, if they even know, they'll say Trump and Biden. Hardly any of them are actually going to even be aware that there's a third party.
So why do you say both parties are like bad? Like when you mentioned earlier, like what, like help us understand a little bit, like what in your view, like, well, you know, Republican Party, right? They're the conservative free market, like you know, small government liberty party, and you know, like why do you say that they're bad as well? Air quotes, like for someone, let's say this is someone's first broach with small L libertarianism, like what would you say?
So if we're going to talk about Democratic Party, honestly, they used to have sort of a redeeming quality, in my view, of being anti-war, non-intervention. And that was the one thing that I was like, oh, you know what? Like, out of all of the things, all of the socialism they've got, like, they've got the saving grace of they're a little bit anti-war.
Right, non-intervention.
That used to be the one thing that was, because I do believe very much in free markets, so a lot of their other policies I'm against. But since Donald Trump has been war reluctant, I'd say he hasn't actually made it out of the Middle East, but he's kind of been like, well, should we do this? Maybe we shouldn't still be at war with North Korea. The left and the Democratic Party has totally sworn off their their anti-war pretensions that they used to have, and now they're full crazy. Republicans, I would say that they are. I don't like them because they have been selling the libertarian message for so long, but not practicing it. And honestly, that's a little bit of how I was like able to get into libertarianism, because my parents were kind of like small government Republican types growing up, and They voted for Bush the first time. But I don't.
Bush Senior or Bush George W. Bush?
W.
W. Good
Yeah.
old W.
And I don't remember any specific issues, but like W had the Congress, he had the presidency, and there are all these small government things that the Republicans are always saying we're going to do this, we're going to reform Social Security, we're going to reform all of these things, and they had full control, and they didn't roll back anything major. There might have been.
Instead, they went into Iraq.
Yeah, they decided to spend a few more trillions of dollars.
Yeah.
And so and they haven't actually. They didn't even make any progress towards balancing a budget. And these are things that I think a lot of Americans are actually small libertarians, and a lot of Republicans too. And that's what the party keeps selling to them. Yeah. They keep saying, "Oh, Democrats spend too much. We're going to cut spending. We're going to balance the budget. We're going to be fiscally responsible." As soon as the election results are in, they're just like, psych. It was a trick.
Here's a couple more $1 trillion to add to the deficit. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually do like the things that they say about reducing the size of government, their free market approach. But that's something that I don't see them actually doing really ever, at least on a consistent basis. So it's the hypocrisy that sort of pulls people in who actually believe these things, and then they don't actually do it.
Yeah.
And so if anyone actually believes in small government and free markets, they do not have a home in the Republican Party.
Yeah. In terms of what actually happens in the Republican Party.
Yeah. The last real small government free market guy who honestly kind of inspired me into libertarianism and a lot of other people is Ron Paul, obviously.
Yeah. Yep.
And none of the Republicans in Congress ever went along with him. He was on all the TV channels, he was labeled as a crazy old guy.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's interesting to see a lot of he's been against the war on drugs since the 70s.
Yeah.
He's way ahead of his time on that. And when he first started talking about it, that might have been where he originally got the crazy old guy label, is his crusade against this the war on drugs that's caused tons of problems.
It really has. So this whole mass incarceration of African Americans, communities, poor communities, right? And I should clarify, poverty, drugs, crime, they're all correlated. And so if you find yourself in one of those areas, you're in, so this war on drugs has really hurt that intersection of that group of people who find themselves poor in drug and crime ridden areas. And so
yeah, all you have to do is rewind 100 years to the alcohol prohibition and the gang violence that happened in Chicago, Al Capone and all of those alcohol runners who the reason the mob came to be was they were alcohol traffickers, which once the prohibition was lifted, they lost all their business. They lost all their revenue. Right. They lost their teeth. They had to try and diversify, but honestly, they didn't have nearly the same power as they did at the height of the alcohol war.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, and that just goes to show like black markets, right? Like if as soon as you make something illegal, right, you incentivize black markets to kind of arise,
yeah,
and these illegal markets. And so, if it's illegal, there's going to be high premium. Like it's the people in these
it's going to
markets.
be a huge incentive to enter the market.
Right. Exactly. And it just kind of compounds problems quite a bit. And, yeah. So plus like there's, and then the war on drugs has had issues with like immigration, just like the opioid crisis. Like there's been a lot of, I guess, fallout or subsequent effects that have come from
Big
it.
time. Yeah, but a little bit back to Ron Paul. Like the Republican Party just kind of did him dirty. Like
He should have found a home there, and he didn't find anything.
Yeah, there was rejection there.
Yeah.
It wasn't just indifference. A lot of those people rejected him because like he really was a small government guy, and small government means small government across the board. And that includes the defense sector. We spend close to $1 trillion a year on, well, Department of Defense is a clever PR way of, it used to be called the Department of War.
Yeah.
And I think for clarity's sake, they should probably go back. But it really smooths it over to say, oh, we need another 100 billion for defense spending, when really we're funding our military bases, our hundreds of military bases across the world. We're funding all of these interventionist wars. We're funding the overthrow of Libya, turning it into like the worst place in the world. Like it's crazy that just questioning that was one of the things that he's like, hey, like we've got to rein this back. We're a mess ourselves. We're not in a place to be the policeman of the world, and we can't afford to be the policeman of the world.
Yeah.
And like honestly, that's a contributing factor to where we are today. Just so normalized to war and violence that, I mean, it's not saying that self-defense isn't okay, because it is, but
Yeah.
we haven't had a self-defense war since Pearl Harbor, I think.
Yeah.
So.
And and I've heard in some anti-war libertarian circles that Pearl Harbor was engineered to get us into World War II. The oil embargo in Japan, because they didn't want to.
Yeah.
But anyways, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. So with regards to foreign policy, I think my two kind of counterpoints with libertarianism is, the anti-war isolation stance. I think, we basically, was our policy basically. I mean, minor deviations here and there until World War I, and then obviously World War II. And then we've really thrust ourselves into global affairs. The thing is like after World War II, we essentially told Europe, hey, and the Axis powers that we just defeated, like, you guys can't have standing armies. However, we will protect you under our armed forces and our nuclear umbrella. So we essentially said, like, hey, Germany, France, Japan, like, we don't want you guys to build up another huge army because we don't want another World War III. I mean, you got to remember, like, they had just, the world had just fought through 2 crazy world wars. And so it's like, I don't know. And so for me, like, there was kind of that understanding of like, okay, US will provide the security blanket, which allows us to like, monitor, shipping lanes, allows for free trade, allows for a lot of this stuff. And we would kind of set this global order, the rules of the road. Now, if we were to retreat from that, that would be a pretty big change as well. And, who would step up to, kind of monitor shipping lanes? Who would allow for free trade? How would you allow nations to negotiate, like provide defense? What would you say to people who say like a retreat would be just as bad because it would leave a power vacuum, and Russia, China, I know they're always the bad actors that people, the boogeyman, but I don't know if that's always true. But there is that thought process of like, well, if we retreat from like the system that we kind of help create, this world order that we enforce, it's going to collapse, and like chaos can emerge, and like something else might emerge that we might not like.
Yeah, I mean, those are some pretty good points. Like there is this this sense of normalcy that has arisen around like this hegemony of the US sort of protecting the world. Something that I think, especially with the current state of things, I'd ask, would it be better to have a deliberate drawdown of our international presence, or wait till the U.S. collapses? And I think that
Are you saying the U.S. is going to collapse?
Hey, I'm seeing like late stages of the Roman Empire here.
Yeah. I think a lot of people feel that way too.
I think that's like a really real possibility, that like you can't ignore that as when we're talking about the international community and international stability. The U.S. is out of money. Economy's going crazy. Like, and it's not something that has just come out of nowhere. Yeah. Like it's kind of been a slow decline. But I think eventually there will be something that like you'll hit a tipping point, and the final collapse is going to happen pretty fast. And I mean, I hope that doesn't happen. I hope it doesn't happen within our lifetimes, but it's a very real possibility, and it's a huge risk to the entire world. So I think a deliberate drawdown, and it doesn't have to be overnight for everything. I mean, it'd be great to get the troops out of the Middle East ASAP. Yeah. But as far as this nuclear umbrella, all of these treaties we're in, protecting shipping lanes, I think we could do a little bit more of a gradual drawdown, and just hand it over to the international community to see. I mean, obviously we can't know for sure how things will work out, but I like the collapse of the US empire is like a real possibility. And I think that it would be much more harmful to the world if that happened while we had the current system set up, rather than if we had an intentional drawdown.
Interesting point. I'll save my other point, which is, the Korean War. For every Korea where we intervened and stopped, and where we intervened, now there's a South Korea that, is free, prosperous. We have Samsung, Kia, we have like these pretty cool companies. If it wouldn't have happened, for every one of Koreas, we also have an Iraq and a Libya. And
well, I'd say for every Korea, there's really only one Korea that I could think of. Well, I mean, like as like the metaphorical Korea that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got Vietnam, who has recovered despite the Vietnam War, and like that was pretty bad. I don't know if you've heard of like the My Lai massacre.
Yeah.
Things like that happened all over Vietnam. Huge atrocities. We've got Iraq, we've got Iran, we've got Afghanistan, we've got Libya. Like the list of these bad outcomes is far longer
than any good ones.
than the list of the good outcomes.
So would you say that libertarianism, like anti-war, non-interventionist, is like the major thing with regards to like foreign policy, and the other thing is spending, like spending of.
So with as far as foreign policy goes, like the other side of the coin is free trade. And that's like a real free trade of like no tariffs, no anything, like trade with whoever you want, and like
Voluntary exchange.
Peace through commerce sort of a deal.
Yeah.
And like the theory there is if the world is interdependent enough in commerce, if the saying is if goods and services aren't crossing borders, troops will.
Yeah.
And that's kind of been the way of things in like a historical observation. As you cut off the goods and services, tensions start to rise. Like you could see it with the recent China issue. We've been levying all kinds of tariffs and things like that, and tensions are rising.
Yeah.
And I mean, with Japan, the oil embargoes stopped trading oil with them, and
they can attack us. Yeah.
we'll say tensions rose.
He's referring to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. So like that's the other side of where with a truly free market, which we really haven't seen in our lifetimes, the chance of violence internationally between states goes down significantly.
Great.
Yeah, so that's sort of the libertarian view on that.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a foreign policy segment. I'm gonna bring on my brother who served 2 tours in Iraq, and you know, his views have changed, and you know, you've gone through some different stuff. So
yeah.
So I think they'll be kind of interesting. I guess kind of wrapping up here and kind of closing. What do you think the future is? I guess any other thoughts you'd have about small L libertarianism, you know, the current election race, like Democrat, Republican, like just any final thoughts you would share to our listeners. And you know, if you were, this is your moment to shine, to tell them, you know, what you'd want to tell them.
Well, first of all, statistically, your vote probably won't make a difference. So with that off the table, really, you should not feel bad at all about voting your conscience, especially if that's third party. So like, really vote your conscience. Free market is actually, I think, a huge solution to a lot of problems. Like if you look at medicine, medical prices have been going way up over our lifetimes. And if you look at the unregulated medical practices of plastic surgery and LASIK, they've actually gone down significantly in the past 20 years. So, and those things are things that don't qualify for insurance, and basically Medicaid, people have to Medicaid, Medicare. Yeah. And so those services have to compete on an open free market. And that's not the case with the entire, they
have to
all of the
on
rest of the medical
quality. Yeah.
Yeah.
The rest of healthcare doesn't.
Yeah. The rest of healthcare, like you go in, it's sort of like, you don't know what you're going to pay. You don't really know what the quality is going to be until you're done. And then they send you this massive bill and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It was
the checkup. Yeah.
$1,500 a night to stay in this hospital bed. Like, so like, I think things like opening things like that up to free market, I'm not an expert in healthcare, but Singapore has what seems to be a little bit more of a free market in healthcare, and their healthcare costs are around I think a third of the U.S. healthcare per person, and it's not like they have a huge problem with healthcare. It's pretty solid.
Yeah.
So I think free market with respect to healthcare can be a huge boon to the American people. I think an actual free market in respect to just the market that we buy and sell things every day in has a huge potential to bring down prices in the grocery store. Sound money policies, that's something that we could spend a whole show talking about.
I know libertarians love the Fed. So.
Yeah, we love it. It's,
I was sarcastic for anybody.
Yeah, if you didn't know, the Fed is driving inequality more than just about anything else.
Yeah.
So if you're a Bernie bro or a Biden person who is upset about inequality, look at the Fed.
You really should be focusing in on the Fed.
Yeah, and the libertarians are probably going to be the only people out there who are going to even be thinking about sound money policy, which like definitely is it would be a huge benefit towards reducing inequality. So think about that. But yeah, really vote your conscience. It's your votes. Everyone will tell you that your vote's worth 3 times more if you vote libertarian. I don't know if you've talked about that before, but all the Trump supporters will say, "Oh, vote libertarian is a vote for Biden." All the Biden supporters will say, "A vote libertarian is a vote for Trump." And you're actually going to be voting libertarian, so that's basically 3 votes. You're voting.
That's pretty funny.
So if you want to commit voter fraud and vote 3 times,
vote libertarian.
Yeah.
All right, you heard it here first. Vote libertarian. Well, thanks, Josh, for coming on. I know you're busy with school and whatnot, so appreciate you taking some time and talking to us. So.
Yeah, no, this has been fun. If you ever need a filler guest in the future, let me know.
Okay, definitely, we'll do. If we need more libertarian viewpoints, we'll make sure to get you on. So,
well,
small libertarian.
Yeah, if you, you obviously need. If you want more, then you know where to go.
That's true. All right, thanks, Josh.
All right, have a